Hello, and welcome back to TalkStream, the live streaming show of ONTOX Academy, which brings you the voices of the expert on alternative to animal testing, toxicology, and science, and whatever I was interested in last week. My name is Matteo, and I'm the host of this space, and I'm very happy to be back here after a couple of months where we were not doing any episode because we were busy traveling mostly. Few words of introduction if you don't know us, even though this one is our 15th episode, I believe, so there is a good chance that you saw already some of the episode or that you heard about us somewhere. But if on the off chance that you don't, I'm going to give you the short version. Basically, ONTOX, we are a Belgian company and we are focused on promoting alternative to animal testing in toxicology, but in general in science. And we do it in very different ways. We work in European projects who are developing these alternatives. We have companies who develop these alternatives to organize trainings or to consultancy. We have communication activities like this one. For example, we have videos and podcasts, and we are very active on social media as well. So we try to share news around it every day. We also have our own board game, who actually tries to explain to people how this very complicated board works. And we also have a line of educational products that also go in the same direction. So if you're interested in any one of these things, you can just check our website, ontox.academy.be. You can find all the information there and also our contacts if you want to reach out. And for TalkStream, as I said, this is a space where we try to invite experts to help us understand something that is very complicated to understand. And it can be alternatives to animal testing, can be a technique, it can be the world of toxicology, but it can also be the world of science in general, because the world that we are living in, it is very complicated, and sometimes we need a hand to understand it more. So that's what we're going to do in the next hour or so. And I hope you're going to have fun. And you can also, of course, interact with our guest, whether you're following us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, or whatever you are. You can just type your question there. You can just tell me how you feel. You can just say whatever it's your question for the guest. You can even try to ask me a question, even though I'm going to probably say I don't know. But who knows? Maybe you're going to be lucky. So that's it. That's how it's going to go for the next hour or so. And with that out of the way, let's dive into the topic that we prepared for you today, which is LGBTQIA and I+ community in science, which it's a very important topic that I wanted to discuss for quite some time. In fact, we originally planned this specific event for last month because it was the Pride Month. But what the heck, we don't have to talk about this specific argument only in one specific moment of the year. So at the end of the day, we did in July, and it's fine as well. And I'm going to give you just a few numbers to try to understand why it's important to discuss about this. And as usual, I always try to find something that is as verified as possible, so published and peer-reviewed as much as possible. So even though it might not be the truest and the most accurate numbers ever, it is probably the most relevant that we have. And the one that I want to show you now is this specific paper, which was published a couple of years ago in Science Advance, where quite a large survey was performed on professional in STEMs, like 25,000 people were contacted, and 1,000 of them were part, or they defined themselves as part of the LGBTQI+ community. And as you can imagine, the results of this survey were not the best. The questions were always around situation within the workplace, how people were feeling, in working in the specific environment in which they were in that specific moment. And as we know, working in science is already quite hard, but if you are part of this specific community, well, it's going to be harder because many of them, and the majority of them, are reported to have more difficulties than their peers to have access to resources, for example, to succeed in science. They reported to have less career opportunity, and they also reported to be less prone to report a situation of harassment or discrimination at work, which is not good. And of course, this was also resulting on the well-being of these people because they were reporting to have more health issue, more mental issue, from minor to quite severe, going till to depressive symptoms. So it's not a great situation there. And to give you more perspective here, is not just about, of course, it's about the people, but it's also about the science, in the sense that we now know, I mean, there are many researchers now that are pointing these out, that the more diverse a team is, the more the research that this team is going to do is diverse and going to include different things, which in science is useful. For example, there are many researches that shows that when women and men are working together in a team, they tend to take into account gender and sex as a parameter in their experiment, which of course make in a way that their experiment is more inclusive and is more representative of the world in which we live. So we do need somehow to increase to really celebrate and to really increase the inclusion and diversity within science, because, well, it's the right thing to do, and everybody has to gain. And that's the reason, well, some of the reason why today we are going to have a look at LGBTQI+ community in science and try to understand a little bit better. And just before we introduce you with the guest, I just want to give a big thank you to the, let me remove the TalkStream logo here, to the 3 European project that helped us to shape this event, which are PrecisionTox, ONTOX, and RISK-HUNT3R, which are all part of the same cluster called ASPIS, because the researchers that we are going to speak with in a moment are all coming from this project and member of the LGBTQIQ community, and they were kind enough to decide to share with us their point of view. So thank you very much for this project. You can also find the event, the episode that we did on them on our YouTube and our website. So you can find them back there. So that's everything that I had to say about the introduction and why it's important to discuss on LGBTQIE+ community in science. And it's now finally time for you to meet the expert that we prepared for you. Oh my God, I spoke too much already. Okay, hello everyone. Let me go. Let me move because otherwise it seems that I'm looking in the void. Let me go in the way in which I see you in my screen. So I see Marie Corradi as the first one. So thank you very much for being here. PhD student at the University of Applied Science at Utrecht University. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you very much. Introduce even better yourself in a second, but for now, I go to the next one. Mathieu Vinken is actually a veteran of the show because he has been here already once. Professor of toxicology at the VUB and coordinator of ONTOX, by the way. So welcome as well, again. And the third one is Simòn Perera de Rosario, business development manager at the ProtoQSAR and also the secretary manager of PRISMA, which is a Spanish association which is actually working to promote inclusion, diversity, and equality in science and technology and innovation, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks to you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go right immediately on the question that I have, and you can also introduce quickly yourself while you start to reply. But I really immediately want to ask you one thing to see if it makes sense why we stop all these events. And it's like, does it make sense to have an event called LGBTQI+ community in science and not just LGBTQI+ community in general? And I'm going to go with you can do the same round that I did before. So Marie, Mathieu, and Simòn, and then we'll come back.
Right. I'm not sure I have a lot more to do in introducing myself. I'm indeed a PhD candidate at the Vrije Universiteit of Applied Sciences, and my research topics are in artificial intelligence and specifically natural language processing to support the development of new approach methodologies. And I would say, to answer your question, Matteo, I mean, yes, it does matter to have this topic specifically in science, though it's important in general. But we are also pioneering the discoveries of tomorrow, and we are taking part in shaping the society. So I think it's very important that science actually leads the way in this as well.
Thank you, Marie. Mathieu?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for organizing this and for the introduction. I also cannot add that much to the, introducing myself, but to answer your question, of course, I agree with Marie. But I must say here, I'm a bit biased maybe because I'm very privileged in the sense that I live in a very, very LGBTQ, friendly country in Belgium, which is one of, the top 3 most friendly kind of countries in the world. I mean, in terms of LGBTQ. And, just to give you an idea, for example, we have a vice prime minister who is a transgender person. And it was a big deal a couple of years ago when she came into force, when she started the position. It was a big deal, abroad, that it was not a big deal in Belgium. People said, well, yeah, it just is what it is. So, but, personally myself, I did never experience professionally or privately any problems with this, although there was, a kind of a bit of a situation a couple of years ago when I applied for a position in a scientific organization at the European level, in the executive committee. Basically, it was a kind of a voting system, and I was looking for the support from different national societies. And to my big surprise, when I was looking for the support from the more Eastern countries, I was told, well, indirectly, of course, well, maybe it's not a good thing that somebody who is gay would, have a position, in the executive committee. And I was a bit surprised, what year are we living in? So eventually I got the position. And since that time, I also try to, advocate things like inclusiveness in that particular organization. So yeah, just to say that I think it is necessary and it is good that we have this discussion.
Oh, wow. But this specific feedback was shared openly during the process.
Openly, that's to say indirectly. Of course, you know how it goes with votings. You're not supposed to, look for support, but that was also the indirect and not official, feedback I got, but it was there. And I really was surprised. So just to say, I mean, Europe is usually having a leading position in this kind of debate. And it is true in a lot of European countries we are going, very well. But there are other parts in Europe, and especially outside of Europe, where this is absolutely the opposite. So I think it is important we have this discussion indeed.
Okay. There's a very weird sound coming from this room. I apologize. Simòn?
Yes, thank you. So I fully agree with my colleagues. And in fact, I think it comes to 3 different types of things. So of course, the answer is yes. And I think it's because of 3 different types of reasons. First, we work in science. So maybe in another life, I will have loved to be a cabaret dancer, but I am not one of those. So we are in a system which is STEM, and it's the system in which we can talk and in which we can do an immediate change. Of course, we also have to, let's say, fight for our rights and for everyone's rights in general outside of science, but we are working 8 hours a day, at least, in science. So that means for me that we have to do this in our immediate, let's say, milieu. And so it's a thing of human rights in our work. And that brings me to the second thing. Science is changing. And it has to change. And there is a big conversation, for example, on peer review and systemic inequalities in general in science for lots of different people, and of a system that makes its people work too much and so on. So we are talking about changing this industrial kind of system in which we talk, or in which we work. And I think this is one of the aspects that is on the table. So we think in science as an objective thing, and of course it's quite objective, and we work towards objectivity. And of course science is the best way that we have to understand the world. But science is made of people. So and people are not robots, and everyone, including the 4 here, we have biases. Everyone have different types of biases. And LGBT discrimination, let's say LGBTQI plus phobia, is a bias that some people have. So that's something that we need to put in the table to have a better science on the overall, because when science is more diverse, it's better, and so on. And the last thing is what Marie said. Science is prestigious, so people look at us, and sometimes even the name of science is used to hold opinions that are transphobic, LGBT phobic, homophobic, and that are not really based on science, but science or a very bad conception of science is used. So we kind of have a joint responsibility to say we are scientists, and we don't approve the use of the things that you're saying using science in a way. I think that's these three things are very important. Silenced.
I muted myself because there were very weird noises coming from this room. Hopefully they will stop. No, you made very good points, and I think you introduced a lot of the things that I wanted to ask, but I want to pick one for now. You mentioned, for example, peer review. You mentioned a few things that are, of course, specific of science, which makes sense in this discussion. And so I'd like to ask you if you think, or in your experience you have, Mathieu, you kind of applied already to this, if there are aspects that makes important to, let's say, that makes the LGBT community in science having more issues, specifically in science and not somewhere else. So is there something within science that makes it even more problematic for LGBTQIA plus community, like publications, like access to funds, like peer review, mentorship, whatever you have in mind? Maybe something that you saw, that happened to you, or you simply think that this is more problematic and it is specific to science. And let's shake it up, and let's start with Mathieu, even though you kind of already replied to it.
Well, let me take the example. For example, if there were to be any issues in terms of discrimination when applying for funding or something like this. So honestly, I don't think so, at least not, well, that I'm aware of, but I only apply for European, Belgium, US, and sometimes Brazilian funding, which are in general quite LGBTQ friendly, I would say. So I also don't think there really is a need when you apply for such a things, for such a grants, to make your status in that respect, open. Well, even though I don't think it would be an issue anyhow. But on the other hand, I also am a little bit concerned about positive discrimination. You see what I mean? Well, unless, of course, if there were to be any specific program at the European level only for LGBTQ kind of projects or something. But we also need to make sure that we don't have, like the opposite kind of effect. So it would not be fair also to other people if, for example, people would be inclined to give, like a grant to somebody just because his or her LGBTQ kind of status. That would not be fair. And again, I think it would have the opposite effect in the sense that we want integration, we want to be integrated in society. And I think that would lead to isolation even more, because then we would be like split as a kind of a separate group. So at least in my opinion, no problems myself experienced yet, but I'm pretty sure in other parts of the world there actually are, or even in Europe.
Okay, no, that's a good point. Yes. Simòn?
So I have to say I don't agree with the thing that Mathieu said about positive discrimination, but maybe that's for another discussion. I think that when you're a scientist, so what people tells us at PRISMA, to make a bit of context, this, as you said, is an LGBT association that works in science, and we have like about 150 members in Spain. And some of the things that we have done is talking with the ministries in order to have like full LGBT equality in science, and also, well, this in the law of science, or the LGBT law that we have in Spain. Both were signed this year, or this and last year. So what people tells us is it's not always, or it's not only about harassment. So harassment is the last step of a continuum of bad things that can happen when you're an LGBT person in science. Of course, harassment is the least frequent one because it's the most serious one. But there are lots of other things, such as discrimination and exclusion. For example, when you're going to be hired, and that is important for lots of LGBT people, for example, trans people, or gender non-conforming people, or people who have a gender expression who is not very normative. These people face higher inequalities when they go, for example, for a job interview, or even when they apply with their CV. And then a step below that, there's living in the closet. So we know that with the numbers that we have, it's like about 60% of people, of gay men, and higher numbers of lesbians or LGBT women, and a higher number of people who can hide. Essentially, they are they are out of the closet in their personal life, but they are in the closet in their professional life. And this is not a private matter, which is something that is said lots of times, because straight people is talking all the time about their personal life. So it may be private, but it's not no, sorry for that. It's personal because it's not a professional detail, but it's not private because straight people is sharing this all the time. And also hiding this, hiding your gender identity, or hiding your gender attraction, it has consequences. So it makes people have more mental health issues, which is also a particular issue in science, that of mental health. And it makes people even publish less, probably because you're in a less friendly work environment. So it has health consequences, it has professional consequences, and it's just about not saying who you are, not sharing that. So I think that would be like the 3 steps of what can happen. And even when we don't hear about harassment every day, although there are cases, and we know cases, and we know people that has been harassed, even in Spain, which is a very open country, also one of the most open in the world. But we have had clear cases of harassment to people, specifically for being a faggot. So nothing that we can doubt about. So even when we don't have those every day, we have lots of other things, bad things going on for LGBT people in STEM in general.
No, indeed, it's important. It's good that you underlined that. Indeed, it's a much more multidimensional problem. It's not just one thing, or like the end point that everybody sees. It's a much more multidimensional issue. Marie, you have something to add?
Yeah, I want to bounce back quickly on a couple of things that Simòn said, because he mentioned a lot of things with which I agree in majority. I think one of the things as well is when you are being open about your sexuality or your gender, etc., is also the microaggressions that you face. That people, well, either there's 2 things. It's I am being very open, but people tend to assume that I'm straight, even though I live in also one of the most open countries in the world, the Netherlands, maybe even more than Belgium. So sorry, Mathieu, but people always assume, well, you are straight immediately. So that's something that happened in general, but also specifically in the work context. As Simòn said, yeah, people speak about their private life all the time. And I was at the conference recently where I was speaking about my having a child recently, and that someone looked at me up and down and said, "Oh, you recovered quickly." Well, my partner carried my child, so yeah, that's the kind of thing that can happen. And that's not to say that people don't necessarily do it on purpose, but there needs to be more awareness that that the default is not that people are straight. I think a second.
Please go on. No, go on. We just reacted to that.
The second issue that I want to bounce back on is that of visibility, which is then being very open with your gender or sexuality, because I think there is still quite a lack of very recognizable LGBTQIA plus figures in science, and that refers back to the mentorship thing that you were talking about. Because when you don't you don't know who is gay, lesbian, trans, queer, etc., then you don't necessarily know who to turn to for advice or for mentorship. So I think that's something that also needs to happen more in science specifically, because I think it's developing quite quicker in other parts of society, actually, for that.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Okay, you already went super ahead in the question that I had, so I have to catch up with all you said. One aspect that I had when I was preparing for this episode was that, of course, we talk about equality, we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion for quite some time in our society. And of course, LGBTQIA plus community maybe came last in this specific discussion, but we're talking about often women, for example, or inclusion of, let's say, non-white people. And I'm wondering, and I ask myself, because I really don't know, is there a difference, and which is the difference when we talk about discrimination in science is possible, let's say for women, or discrimination for LGBTQIA plus community in science? Is discrimination is always discrimination, no matter what, or there are differences that we should actually take into account when we try to find a way to go forward? And by the way, I remember all the audience that, please, if you have any points or questions, don't be afraid to interject. Let's start with Simòn, because I know you have a lot to say usually.
So this is a very hard one. There are specificities, and I think that every type of discrimination that a person can experience is different than other types of discrimination. So it's not the same if you're a woman than if you're an LGBT person, that if you're a racialized person, so a person of color, for example, or if you have some kind of functional diversity. It's always different, and I think that that makes so it's reasonable that there are, let's say, different fights or different organized people fighting each of the discriminations. And that's why I think it's good, for example, that we have, or that we celebrate Pride, LGBT Pride in STEM. Then we have specific days and so on. But I think it's also important to remember two things. The first is that the goal is the same. So the goal is for everyone to live in a society which is fair, and that means for everyone to be able to live with freedom and with equality. So we also have to be together, asking or demanding these things and fighting against these different types of discrimination. And also I want to add that we cannot forget, when we make this question, that there are women who are LGBT, and that makes for them to be in an intersection of two potential discriminations or two potential inequalities. And this happens also with lots of other intersections, like LGBT people, migrant, for example, and so on. So we have to be particularly aware of these people, and not only have in mind, when we talk about LGBT people, not only have in mind like men, for example, who normally are more visible. We have to specifically work for what happens to lesbian or bi, LGBT women. We have to have in mind that there's women which are trans, which even face more inequalities. So short answer is there are differences, but we have to be together, and we have to be aware that some people experience more than one type of difficulty, let's say, and we have to be particularly we have to take them particularly into account.
Yeah, we have to include when we talk about inclusion. Yes, makes sense. Marie?
Yeah, Simòn kind of stole my point on this, because I was also having in mind the intersectionality. It's that's basically that you need to keep in mind that people like a black lesbian woman and a white lesbian woman will experience discrimination differently. And I think it's about being also, even just being aware of it is already good. And I think we also sometimes, even within our community, guilty of excluding some parts of the community because we're focusing, for example, on, speaking for myself, lesbian women, and then we're forgetting that there are also trans women within, the LGBTQ community. They're also bi women. They're also and everyone. Well, these are their piece of cake, so to speak. So yeah, it's I don't think I have a lot more to ask other than you should be aware of it, and not everything is gonna fit everyone. So it's also about, I think, when you try to implement changes of policies or programs or support for the LGBTQIA plus community, to be open to feedback and to be open to listening to multiple points of view. I think that's a very important thing, and that's something that I find a bit too bad, though I know that we were limited in the number of guests and in the organization, because we are majority cis and white people on the show, so it's a pity that we don't have a direct point of view for that. But it's good that Simòn brought this up, I think.
Yeah, no, it would be amazing to have more people, but indeed, one of the points of discussion would be why we're only white and why we're only cis, indeed. But that would go too long, I think. But let's go to Mathieu first.
Well, I already kind of forgot the question, but your question was like, so would the type of discrimination be the same, like LGBTQ wise to compared to, for example, women or non-white people? That was the question, right? In science?
Or if we should talk about it differently, we should talk about the same way.
Well, they used to be called, minorities. I mean, everything that deviates a kind of like, from what is considered normal, and that would be the heterosexual white man, because science is still dominated by men, although women are catching up, at least in some areas, which is a very good thing, by the way. But, that's a physical kind of, like a way to recognize. I mean, you recognize somebody who's not white, you recognize a male or a female, but being gay or being LGBTQ, you don't necessarily recognize this, physically. And in that respect, I think you could say that it's somehow a bit of a different way of discrimination. And this also has been alluded to by Marie, like a lesbian white or a lesbian black woman will probably experience discrimination in a bit of the same way. But I think, do we necessarily need to define it as a different way of discrimination? In the end, it's all about inclusiveness, And I think this is something that we should, keep in mind, without really focusing on individual kind of subpopulations, if you will, because this will not help, the actual inclusivity. It will make even things more complicated. And I would like to come back to this further in the interview. So, I think all to all, discrimination, yes, will be the same. The way actually people will experience it, that will be different.
Okay, no, it's interesting. It's a good point. Honestly, for me, I wasn't sure at the beginning when I asked this question, and I like that you provided a clear picture of it. So I have tons of other questions, but before, I would like to show you a short video that I shot last week. I went to speak with a professor in Eindhoven and a student there who are actually working to try to somehow improving the inclusion and equality of LGBTQIA plus community in science in that university. So I'm going to show you this video, and then we come back and you tell me what you think about it. So see you in a bit. Audio is gone apparently. Let me see. Apologies. Apologies. I'll try to fix it. Let's see. Let's do like this. Very nice video. Swear. Let me just do it from here. Let's try this way. Share screen. My train got delayed because people were on the tracks. Weather sucks, and I'm lost. It's a great way to start.
So I'm Alexander Serebrenik. I'm full professor social software engineering here at Eindhoven University of Technology. And among many things I'm doing, I'm also a member of the board of Compass.
I'm Lea Faris. I'm a student here, a computer science student at TUI. I'm also part of the board of Compass. In fact, I'm the chair of the board of Compass. I came here to study computer science in a place that's well reputed, but also that in a country that's safe for LGBTQ people.
Compass is the LGBTIQA Association of students and employees of our university. It is quite exceptional in the Netherlands because many universities have associations for LGBTIQ students. Some have associations for LGBTQ employees, but they're separate. Compass is exceptional because we are working together.
Something else that Compass does is take an active role in policymaking for the university. It's not just a community for students and staff to find each other, but also we help give advice to the executive board and to real estate and to all these small sub-organizations within the university to help make the place more inclusive for everyone.
To give a couple of examples, we have all kinds of formal ceremonies in the Netherlands. Those formal ceremonies are typically associated with dress code, which up to something like 4 years ago used to be gendered. Men wear X, women wear Y, no other options available. So Compass was one of the organizations that pushed for change, and now there is a dress code, but it is non-gendered. No, not really. I mean, it's there are very few people who would be consciously objecting, but it is just a large organization, so changes are slow.
The university is accepting of change, but it's not necessarily something that happens on its own. It's something that needs a dedicated group to push for it. And even then, it can be very slow to have something happen because it has to go through layers of bureaucracy, through people that don't recognize how important the problem is. And it's always good to have a voice there that's always pushing to make sure that stuff like this happens. I'd say in particular visibility, because one thing that I've heard from a lot of students and a lot of staff is that despite these rainbow benches and also rainbow stairs in front of the main building, there's not necessarily much visible activity in the LGBTQ plus sphere. And as a group, as a board of volunteers, we can only really have a limited amount of influence and activities. And so having larger gestures, larger, for example, explicit attempts by the university to show that they're a safe space for LGBTQ plus individuals would be something that would be a big improvement?
She is trying to address many diverse populations, many diverse subgroups. In a way, I would like to see diversity being part of the DNA rather than clothes. We can celebrate diversity during special events like Diversity Week and whatnot, but I would love to have every single decision being taken by the university or by any decision-making body within the university to be checked from the perspective of diversity and inclusion.
I would say that the main topic to focus on is to broaden the university's view of what diversity is. There's been a great big push to get more women in science, which is extremely important. But from what we hear from the executive board and from the communication that HUE, that sometimes appears to be where their view of diversity can end. Broadening this view of what it means to have a diverse environment is something that could really benefit.
And also seeing diversity as a source of strengths rather than lack of diversity as a problem.
Apologies for the technical issue. Reaction. Mathieu, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I agree with most of what I heard here. I think diversity should not be another box that we need to tick when we, fill in an application form or something, because it's now on the agenda, high on the agenda, especially in European countries and so on. And again, I mean, it's something that you should comply with, and that people actually say, yeah, we do, but they don't realize what it is. And I think the example was very nicely given, like, oh yeah, we have about 40% women in our consortium or whatever, so we are fully inclusive. That's not it. On the other hand, and I know that not everybody agrees with me, but I think expertise should remain the main criterion for including people. I mean, it's not, I don't think it would be a good thing that, there would be some rule or something that at least 10 or 20% of the people involved in your organization or consortium should be LGBTQ. That's not it. I mean, the main criterion should be expertise. This is what I mean with positive discrimination. That's not a good thing. They should be included for sure, but I mean, it should be not be the main criterion, because again, that will convey the opposite message to the people by which we want to be accepted. You see, then we really would set us as a separate kind of population, if you will, and I don't think it's a good thing. But all to all, I agree with everything that has been told in the video. Nice video, by the way.
Can I react to what Mathieu just said?
Please.
So I do agree that competency or I can't remember how exactly you put it, but that this should be the main criterion. But on the other hand, with the selection process, for example, if you look at job applications, with the selection processes that are at work, you don't necessarily reach the diversity of people that you would want. See, in computer science, for example, you will reach primarily men, and I think there has been a study that also shows that, for example, women, if they don't take at least, I don't know if it's 80 or 90% of the requirements that are on the application, they won't even apply. So I think there's, yes, the positive discrimination. You don't want to be seen as giving. We don't want to be seen either as taking jobs just because we're a woman, we're gay, we're whatever. But they're also, I don't know what the solution is there, but there needs to be compensatory mechanisms, I think, for that.
Yeah, no, and it is a very complicated issue indeed, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there is one easy answer. Otherwise, we will not discuss about it. We find it already. Simòn?
Yes. So the video was really nice, and the work of these people is great.
Did you know them before, just by curiosity?
No, not really. I took notes of their names. So positive discrimination is a hard issue because it asks for a compromise. It asks for a balance, and it asks for a balance now in order to reach maximum excellence in the future. And it acknowledges the fact that if we don't do this, we will never have maximum excellence, because maximum excellence is reached when all women have the same opportunities than men, and when all LGBT people have the same opportunities than non-LGBT people, and when all racialized people have the same opportunities than non-racialized people, and this is not where we are now. So if we don't have now maximum expertise, we are losing talent of women and LGBT people and racialized people and so on. So if we want to reach maximum excellence in the future, we need to have a compromise now where we make this, what was the word that Mary used? Compensatory measures in a way to ensure that people that faced inequalities without compromising excellence, and that is the very hard part, how to do it. Get there and get to contribute, having diversity as a strong point, which was a really nice thing that Alexander said in the video. And he commented on some, or they commented on two things that are interesting, which is that it's very difficult for large organizations to change because there are lots of inertia, and then that makes for small groups of people like LGBT people, which in the highest numbers would be 20% of society, or minoritized people like women who are not a minority but have been minoritized in their access to power or in their access to high places, even in universities and in STEM. It's hard to change and it's slow to change. And talking from PRISMA, that's why we think that it's important to talk with research centers and universities, for example, and we are actively talking with many of them in Spain to implement some actions to provide change on the quickest way as possible. But there will be sometimes people who don't care about this or who don't see why it's necessary. And I have to say, because we're in Europe and Poland is in Europe and Hungary is in Europe, and the far right party in Spain, which is getting closer and closer to the government, is in Europe, even when Spain is like one of the most open countries in the world for this. So there will be people who don't like this because of I don't know, religious beliefs, because of political views, because of power inertia. So it is important not only to talk with the people that is convinced or that you can convince, it's important also to talk to the people who has the power to make equality and diversity and inclusion a matter for everyone. And that's the politicians, the ones that make the law. So we at PRISMA is very, it's very like beautiful to see that some of the proposals that we have made, like for example, people in research centers, in each research center there should be someone who is available for talking about LGBT issues and who is taking consideration of this. It's really important to see this in the law, because then if there is one research center who happens to be managed by a far-right person, no matter what, LGBT people in that research center will be protected by the law. So this is very important, and the point of visibility, of course, is very important as well.
No, indeed, it's a great point to make that what Lea was saying is like it's important to have a voice that keeps saying this. It's not going to happen on its own. the change. It's great that there are people like PRISMA, in a way, people like you that also decides to say, yeah, I'm gonna put my face on and talk about this. Okay, cool, very nice. I have tons of other questions, but before, I know that there is my colleague Leonie who also has a few questions for you on the same topic, and I really need to drink. So I'm gonna leave you because I'm really my mouth is dry. I'm gonna leave you for some minutes with my colleague Leonie, who will be with us in a few seconds, just after a very short advertisement from UntiTalks, which we're gonna show you the board game that we created called Tatabox. So see you in a bit with Leonie.
UntiTalks presents Tatabox, the first game about new approach methodologies. You want to be part of the journey towards alternatives to animal research and tests? Change is one game away. Come and embody a scientist on their path to develop a new NAM. Tile by tile, step by step, play your way towards validating your method. Save animals while creating your path. And understand the needed steps for validation and dissemination. Play, learn, raise awareness, discuss, teach, support. May the fun be with NAMs.
Hi everyone. I'm very happy to also have a chance to talk to you tonight about this topic because it is very near and dear to my heart. I have been involved in activities in the major scientific society in my scientific background to push the topic of gender and diversity a bit more to the forefront and become active. But it was very focused on the role and of women in this society, because the group that initiated this were all white, presumably, as far as I know, heterosexual women. So that was the perspective that we were coming from. But we were very quickly noticing that this is not, the full picture. So we want to, moving ahead, we want to include more diverse voices, and we want to look at different forms of discrimination. But this, for me, kind of creates a struggle, and this is something I want to talk to you all about, because to do this, we need to involve people from communities that are struggling, that are facing structural discrimination. So they already have an additional workload on their daily lives, their careers, their mental, emotional health. And I want to ask them then, hey, but I also want to do this extra work and be active. And it's not paid, but you need to do it. So I just kind of want to get your perspective on how, your thoughts on this issue that's for minorities is often, you discussed this, not the right word, but marginalized groups in STEM that we, and as a woman, I'm active there, we are asked to do committee work, community work, in addition to what we already have in our professional careers. And what are your thoughts on that? And from your perspective or your experience, are there also ways around that? So can employers come up with models that help people who are active in this field to manage this additional workload? And just because I know that Simòn is taking on a very active role, maybe I want to hear from you first, and then Marie, and at the end, because Mathieu, you are in your role as professor, you are kind of an employer, so maybe I want to get your thoughts on what's been said at the end. So Simòn.
Yes, thanks. So this is a very important question: how to engage with the people and how to make the people be engaged with what we want, which is equality, diversity, and inclusion for everyone. And I think it's important to strengthen that we all want this, right? And maybe we, the ones that we are talking here, are the ones that have a certain degree of a privilege, because we could spare some time to think about this, or to come to talk about this, or to put our face, and maybe other people didn't have that that privilege. For us, what we have done in PRISMA is working in the framework of co-creation, which is trying to understand what the LGBT people, because we are talking about them or us in particular, so trying to what the people need, and then trying to bring that to the forefront, and talking with the research centers and universities and so on. So in PRISMA, for example, we are a committed group of people, privileged group of people who can work on these late nights, let's say, or after our main work. But it was important for us to count with the people in general. So to ask people, what do you think that it's needed? How do you think that research centers can be improved? And also, we want to do this in a continuous way, in a granular way. So we, when we propose these actions that we normally propose them to research centers to be taken to ensure equality, diversity, and inclusion in the centers. We ask the people that we had around us. So now we want to know, if you live in Germany, for example, not in Spain, should these measures be different because there's different realities? If you live in a university or work in a university, sorry, how different is this from a research center? So we are continuously trying to adapt these measures to the to the people, no, and to the specific context. So I would say that the summary would be work for the people. So the privilege, we can work for the people, but we have to do it listening to the people, not making them work more, because lots of times people will not even be able to do this. But we kind of have the responsibility to take take profit from our privilege to work for the needs of those who don't have it.
Thanks. Excellent points. Marie, I don't know if you're also actively involved in like advancing this topic, but I know that you took a big chunk of your time that you're spending tonight with us to talk about this. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm actually not actively involved. I follow what's happening, but I'm at a personal stage where I just don't really have time for this. But I find it's a very difficult question, actually, because on the one hand, it needs to come from us, because we're the one who know the problem, who know what needs to be done, so to speak. But on the other hand, we don't have necessarily all the resources, whether it's time, money, or power, influence, however you want to name it. I think my thought here would be finding allies, but it's easier said than done. But if you find allies in positions of power, or that have more of that resources that you're liking, then it will make our life easier. But I practically am not sure how to do that efficiently, let's say. I'm not sure that's really helping, but
yeah, no, but that's you summarized exactly my my issue here, and where I'm struggling, because I know it has to come from the people themselves.
Yeah, because no one will do it for us, because it doesn't
exactly.
pass. Doesn't that
you have
make
the
sense?
perspective on it. You hold the knowledge to a degree, and I can educate myself and become a good ally. But then still, I don't know if it will be adequate for me to be the voice for the LGBTQIA plus community. So, and that's where I just struggle a bit. But Mathieu, from your more perspective as an employer, maybe there's ways of just somehow acknowledging the extra work that people who are active in this field can somehow be compensated for.
Yeah, well, first of all, as an academic researcher, I think we are used to doing extra unpaid voluntary work. It's absolutely not a 9-to-5 job. But honestly, as much as I really admire what Simòn is doing and what other organizations I'm doing, but I don't do such a thing myself. It's not because I don't want to, but I think for me, the best proof and the best way to really make things happen would be to really consider this as a kind of, I wouldn't say a concept, but really as a verb, and to implement it in my daily life. So what I'm doing, everybody knows probably I'm gay, although I don't talk about it necessarily. I don't feel the need to share my private life. That's just not within my DNA, even probably if I were to be heterosexual. But, I just want to show being gay is only a small part of my identity. Actually, what you are seeing is what is important for you is, my professional life. And I think for me, that has much more power than, going on a gay pride or something, which I fully respect, but it's not really my thing. You see what I mean? And I really think these gay prides and all of these organizations are really strictly necessary, because there's absolutely still a lot of work to do. But that's how I see it. You see what I mean? And as from the point of view as employer, I currently have 20 people in my team. But I work a bit at a special university. It's called the Vrije University. So the free is very important, and we absolutely do not stick to religion. We are open to religion, but just to say you need to have an open mind. And I really try to implement this in my work, and also in the way how I compose my team. It's it's a very diverse kind of team, but that does not necessarily mean LGBTQ, because I don't hire somebody because he or she is LGBTQ. But for example, it's very diverse in terms of internationality, these kind of things. So this is for me also being very diverse, and that's how I do it. So I try to implement in my daily work, in my daily life, rather than to be an advocate of it. But I'm fully with Marie that actually it's a bit of an awkward situation, because we are the ones that should actually voice this. But that's how I feel about this.
Okay, thanks to all of you for sharing your thoughts. And now I'll see what I do with my activities in the future, and how I can find some people who are willing and who have the privilege to spare a little more of their time to work on this project, maybe together with me. So thank you all for giving me your insights. And with this, I want to hand back to Mathieu.
Thank you, Leonie. Thank you very much. Good. We're at the end, which is I would love to speak much more about that, but I took already way much of your time. I have just one question, mostly because I've seen that in the comments there have been a bit of a discussion with the audience about this question of visibility, which we kind of touched upon already here and there. But let's just make one question on that, which is, we said, okay, visibility is important. People need to see more example. But as we discussed already, this means that you have to disclose your sexual orientation, your gender, and everything else, which is something they usually don't have to. And it's something that I feel is very specific to this discrimination, because, as we said before, if you're a woman, you don't have to say it. If you're a man, you don't have to say it. But if you are part of the LGBTQIA+, and you want to be visible, you have to say something more that honestly is not business of anybody else. So what's happening there? What do we have to do? Is it okay to ask people to be more visible? If it's not, how do we get out from this kind of issue? Let's start with Marie, and then I'm gonna free you, so you can say whatever you want, and then you can run away.
So I think it's about fostering the atmosphere where you can come out and you can speak about it. But that's not to say that the thing is when you come out, then people sometimes expect you to educate them. and that's not my job. I mean, I'm willing to if you have questions, but it's also not necessarily my job. I don't have to answer all your questions. It's not a free pass to ask any question about my private life. I share some stuff. I'm quite open about it, but I don't necessarily want you to go prying and ask me stuff. So there's a bit of a trade-off here, I think. So for me, it's the important thing is normalizing and fostering a culture where you can actually take the step to come out and feel confident doing so, but not feeling like I understand that it's not necessarily everybody's thing. Like Mathieu said, if you don't like to share your private life, then that's also fine. But if you feel comfortable enough, that you feel comfortable enough to share these kind of things, because as we mentioned, visibility is important. So that goes with, for example, normalizing the use of pronouns, not having these kind of follow-up questions when you hint to the fact that you are a part of the community. So that these kind of things, normalizing and fostering this atmosphere, and it's very difficult to do it as a carrot and not as a stick, let's say. If you know what I mean. So that it's not. Well, one important part is, of course, that any discrimination, harassment, microaggression should be punished, so to speak. But I would much rather see it as, we are an environment that is very open, not to quote a famous brand, but come as you are. So for me, it's more about this positive, fostering a positive atmosphere.
Great point. I like this approach of like, it's not like you don't have to ask anything else afterwards. It's something I never thought about it, but indeed, it might be that a lot of time the first thing you say this, and then people are like, let me ask you this then. It's like, no. Okay, no,
you look like it. Well,
yeah, okay. That's okay. That's weird. That's just weird. Thank you for this. Mathieu, I mean, you kind of applied quite extensively on you, but I would say more in general, what is your vision on the
concept? I really liked what Marie said at the end, because I like the positive note, because we shouldn't forget gay does not only mean homosexual, but also happy. I mean, we should be happy. And I think to come back to your question, I think, well, let us be clear about this. If people want to come out, if they want to be visible, they should get the opportunity to it. And it's easy to say, of course, because again, I'm in a privileged situation, and it's really a bad thing that there's so many toxic environments. And of course, this is exactly the good work that Simòn and other organizations are doing. We have to strongly encourage this. But I think what we often think is we want to be a bit on the too negative side. I mean, it's not that all people not belonging to LGBTQ are against us or something like that. It's mostly ignorance. I mean, and also it has become so difficult and so complicated. I mean, LGBTQ, I don't even know for what each of the letters and the abbreviations stand for. Also, it's a terminology on its own. The binary people, I mean, you should, address them they and so on. People are just afraid to offend people, and that's just it. And their reaction sometimes is that, okay, I will stay away from it. And so it does not necessarily have to be very negative. So, but on the other hand, of course, again, I would like to make the point that LGBTQ people should be able to make themselves visible without any problems. That should be like the goal in the end.
Great points. No, you touched a lot of points that unfortunately we only have 1 hour, otherwise we will discuss for half a day. But no, thank you very much, Mathieu. Simòn, I give you the final closing of the episode.
No, so I agree fully with what Marie and Mathieu just said. It's important for me that when we talk about being visible, we don't take it as another personal responsibility that we have. The first thing, of course, when you're an LGBT person or any type of person, especially those in minoritized groups, is that your integrity is preserved, your physical integrity, your psychological integrity, and your economical integrity. Let's say that you need to have a job some way to pay your rent, if you're a normal person. So so it's not that you have the personal responsibility to come out of the closet. I think it's more that for the privileged that can come of the closet when their integrity is fully preserved, it's good to do this. And also that we as scientists, we work in science, which is a system, let's say, an industry, some people would say. We are, in any case, a group of lots of people working together and organized in research centers, universities, and so on. And for me, they have the responsibility to foster, to fully make visible that they are LGBT friendly, to have everything in place so that it's true, to create a good environment where people will be able to come out of the closet if they want, and to make visible the people that are already out of the closet, to listen to them, also to look back into the history of science and have a diverse view on the people that maybe were LGBT, of course, with different identities, because these ones, the words are kind of new. And going to the gay thing that Mathieu said, I would like to remember people that anyway, there is a big, straight, gay world outside there. So there's lots of people that fully respect LGBT people, and that we know that being open makes you happier if your integrity is preserved. So that if you can do it, it's good. You will not be like having weird conversations forever in your job when people say, where did you go this past weekend? And if I can only say one last thing, when I talk about the responsibility of research centers and so on, if people is interested in this, I said it a couple of times, but in PRISMA, we co-created with LGBT people a set of actions that we recommend research centers, universities, and so on to be taken, and they are translated to English, and there is a full also translated plan to implement these measures in research centers. So I would recommend people who is out, or maybe not, because even not being out, you can be respectful or caring for the happiness of everyone, and that includes LGBT people. So I recommend people who is interested in this and in EDI in general to take a look and propose them wherever they want and use them wherever they want, because the thing is that as many people as possible is fully happy in their works.
Cool. No, thank you very much. We'll definitely put the link in the description of the video tomorrow when we upload it on YouTube. And thank you for everything else. You really gave me a lot to think about. I didn't honestly know a lot when I started this episode. I feel that I love to discuss with you. I really would love to go even more in depth. But indeed, I promised to keep you only 1 hour, and I already broke this promise because it's already 1 hour and 15. So thank you very much for taking the time, for wanting to be here. Marie, you're even in holidays, so amazing. Thank you very much for being here. And anyway, it's 9, so you should don't work. Apart from Mathieu, that I'm pretty sure that it does it sometimes. But thank you again. You can go. I'm very happy with this episode. I'm not gonna say anything more. Thank you.
Bye everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to you.
Bye.
So this is the end. Where are you? You're there. This is the end of this episode on LGBTQIA plus community in science. I hope you liked it. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something as well. This was also the last episode before the break for summer, because we go for conferences basically every time now. So we are going to be back after August, most likely in October. So keep following us on the social media to see what else we are going to talk about next time. I also would like to thank all the audience, because I saw many people commented a lot. Thank you, Christina, Lucas, Doreen, David. Sorry that I didn't put your comment on the spot, but I hope that we addressed a little bit what you were talking about with visibility. And sorry about that. I really need to drink a little bit more, but that's it. We're gonna be back in a few months from now. In the meanwhile, just follow us on LinkedIn and social media, and well, I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.
Hello and welcome in this new inCLUEded Chronicle. Today we will go over 8 key figures about LGBTQIA+ community in STEM.
40%. In 2016, the Queer in STEM study showed that over 40% of queer scientists are not out to their peers at work. 7%. A 2018 study in Science Advances showed that LGBTQIA+ students were 7% less likely to continue an undergraduate STEM program compared to their non-LGBTQIA+ peers, drastically limiting the pools of LGBTQIA+ scientists at the earliest stages of their career. 28%. In a study called Exploring the Workplace for LGBTQIA+ Scientists, the Institute of Physics, Royal Astronomical Society and Royal Society of Chemistry found that 28% of LGBTQIA+ respondents stated that they had at some point considered leaving their workplace because of the climate of discrimination toward their community. This statistic was even higher for trans respondents. The study also found that almost half of the respondents, 49%, agreed there was an overall lack of awareness of LGBTQIA+ issues in the workplace. 30%. LGBTQIA+ STEM professionals were also about 30% more likely than their non-LGBTQIA+ peers to have experienced harassment at work. 27%. Compared to their non-LGBTQIA+ counterparts, LGBTQIA+ community in STEM are more likely to have experienced health problems, at least at some time in the past year. 41% more likely to have experienced insomnia, 22% more likely to have felt nervous stress, or 30% more likely to have experienced one or more depressive symptoms in the past year. 1917. Alan Hart was a doctor who dedicated most of his career to research into treatment for tuberculosis, one of the biggest killers in the 20th century USA. In 1917, he was finally authorized to have the transition surgery and change of name that definitely made him a man to the administration, even though he was already identified as such since he was a little boy in nearly all situations. That makes him the first non-transgender scientist. 2020. Nergis Malvalvala is named MIT School of Science Dean. She is the first woman to take on this position. Dr. Malvalvala is a Pakistan-American astrophysicist and describes herself as an out queer person of color. 500 and over. Lauren Esposito, an arachnologist and the only woman expert on scorpions in the world, co-founded the 500 Queer Scientists, a visibility movement and professional network to boost the recognition and awareness of LGBTQIA+ in STEM fields. Since its creation, it gathered over 1,800 stories, and it keeps growing. Sometimes the absence of data speaks as loud, if not louder, than data itself. In the case of some members of the LGBTQIA+ community, we lack information about their level of inclusion and their well-being in STEM fields. It is particularly the case of non-binary people.
To conclude this chronicle, I'd like to quote an article I've read to prepare it. Don't just tolerate, celebrate.